and welcome to this month's update of the Yarslow Model Railway, and we start with a look at platforms. I've been making platforms for Yarslow over the last 6 weeks or so, and I'll show you exactly how I've been getting on as one of my favourite trains, the Class 20 with the oil tanks, rumbles through. This picture shows the early stages of that construction. You can see on the right where the island platform is, there's a network of supports behind the 40 thou plasticard sides. They are 17mm high. You need to measure your own. My height obviously based on track sitting on the cork base that I've used. And you simply make this network just to give enough support for the tops. On the left you can see that I've cut black plasticard, again 40 thou, to make tops. These are cut out of A4 sheets, carefully measured between the back of the wall and the front of the train, and of course you check clearances with everything to make sure it's all good. I mentioned in the previous video that I'd painted the ground chocolate brown, and you can see that as the express passes in front. And I've re-weathered the track in parts here. And this is one of many trains that I ran just to make sure that the platforms were in a good place. In fact, in this shot you can see I've already added the tops. The tops themselves are made out of 250 grade sandpaper grit, and I've mocked up here the footbridge and the station building just to get a flavour for what it's going to look like, and I quite like that. The gap on the right obviously will link up with the road, but that looks okay, doesn't it? Quite happy with that. And here's a view looking in the opposite direction. This of course is the up platform, lightly weighted just while the glue goes off. And here's a close-up of that sandpaper surface. As I say, 250 grit, it's white, not that that makes any difference, but I want it to look like tarmac, so I'm going to paint this with a light grey colour, just an ordinary emulsion. I'm not too bothered about the joints because tarmac is never poured in one long line anyway, so there will be joints. And I'll put a few square patches in slightly different colours along the platforms just to break up the uniformity of it all. And here's another way of making platforms. The edges of the platforms at Yarslow are strips cut from the Slater's embossed sheet, which looks like paving slabs. And this is a paving slab sheet used to cover the vans platform at Trinity Square. This has come across a bit shiny in the photo, and in fact it is shiny in real life, so it will need a coat of paint just to dull it down, and of course a bit of weathering, and there's probably going to be some kind of canopy over the top of this, but that looks quite nice. I like the way that's come out. Now I'll just let this J11 and its unfitted freight roll past the camera for no other reason than this is not a train that runs very often, so I'll show you a bit of this, but also the fact that this is the permanent way yard section of the layout across the door, and I'm not actually going to touch that section. The bit I'm working on starts here where the overbridge is and the platforms are, and then it runs through the station and the yard up to the other end. So for the minute I'm just doing from the middle junction entrance into Yarslow down to this overbridge. At the other end of the layout I have done some weathering on the track. There's some more to be done here. You'll see in the foreground that the sidings still look rather buff. They're not meant to be, they're meant to be all the same colour. And here's the J36 on an unfitted freight running past the camera, just showing us the state I've got to with regard to the scenery at this, the down end. Now, in the interest of testing, it's good to run a range of trains. So here's a K3 with one of my stopping trains pulling in to the up platform at Yarslow, just testing that cylinders, different types of coaches, overhangs, all kind of different things clear the platform and you're not going to have any problems. You'll notice passengers on these trains. I haven't quite finished populating the trains yet, but about 2/3 of the coaches have passengers. And these rather annoyingly don't seem to want to get off and use the new platform. They're quite happily sitting on the train waiting for it to depart. So all my efforts to make platforms seem to have gone unnoticed. So then I set about making the down platform, which was difficult because it's an island platform, so you've got both sides to make good. And I found the best way of doing this was to actually cut each of the platform faces separately out of the 40 thou plastic and then to butt joint them together. And I did the same on the surface with the 250 grit sandpaper. Made the top and the sandpaper as one piece, not easy when it's about 5 feet long, but that's what I did. And then glued the whole thing down, weighted down with as many things as you can find, as illustrated here. And again, out comes the test train, a few brake vans because of the large footboards that they tend to have, Mark 1s. To the right of the camera you can't see here, there's a Gresley coach with its large footboards, and then there's one of those Stanier coaches that runs on the Wizny Train. So a whole range of stuff just to make sure that nothing fouls the platform edge, either on the main line where this train is sitting or in the loop line nearest the camera. And this is what I've ended up with. Two platforms, rather stark and white, but I like the look of them. I can't stress enough actually how important it is to keep testing. I mean, we call playing trains, but it's important just to test as many trains as possible. This is never has been a video channel on how to do things, just a bit of kind of background advice, and my advice would be to spend as much time running trains as possible. And you can see here that the Wizny Train sitting in the platform, just making sure that that works as well. And here's the J11 again, running around on a test train, having got the up and down platforms both in, glued down, a little bit of tweaking for some of the coaches, but it all seems to be good and ready to go. I was in my keenness to run this test train, I made a few basic errors. I forgot to put the footbridge back for some reason. And you'll see as the train runs down the layout the outcome of another job that I've been threatening to do for a long time and I finally got round to doing, and that is the lighting at Yarslow. It had 3 strip lights above the station here, and I got that kind of light dark light thing going on. I've added a 4th, in the process of which managed to drop something on the building over the lever frames, and as the train jumps and bumps and leaps around over the crossing, you realise that there's stuff on the track and I forgot to hoover the track, so not altogether a clever bit of filming this, but it makes the point that I've now got a uniform light coming down the whole length of Yarslow, because there are 4 strip lights, not 3. There's that bit of something or other that's ending up in the flange way. And the lights, you can see the lights on the top of the picture here. There were originally just 3 of these. I've moved the middle one over to create those 2. I've added this one, and I try and walk backwards with the camera here, and you can see eventually that there is a 4th one now, and that gives me a much better light over this part of the layout. And that's illustrated by this view here. The signal box used to be quite dark, and now it's an awful lot lighter than it was. This Mark II version of the previous bit of film, I've now tidied that building up over the track, got rid of all the detritus that had fallen all over it as I was putting the lights up, and I've got a much brighter view. It does go a little dark in the corner where the train disappears, but I'm not over fussed at that, because it just helps to give the illusion that the train's going off stage. So here comes that exact same train, this time without jumping over all the rubbish that was all over the track. And you can see much better balance of light as it approaches the camera, having left the station. If you go back and look at some of the old videos in front of the signal box, it really was quite dark. It's taken me long enough to get around to do this job, but I'm really pleased that I've done it. So out came the paintbrush to produce a coat of dark grey. It's actually the same grey I've used for the groundwork in the yard, and is a bit dark for tarmac. We're fortunate in that these days most of us are surrounded by tarmac, so it's good to go and have a look, see what it looks like. And it's a lot lighter than you think it is. This grey that I've used looked really quite light in the tin, but it's come out quite dark, so I'm going to buy a lighter grey. It's got a kind of greeny tint to it if you look at tarmac. It hasn't really changed over the years. Very modern tarmac is quite green. You want to avoid that colour, but on the whole tarmac does have a kind of browny greeny grey kind of feel to it, and that's the colour that you want to go for. And now, as people of a certain age would say, for something completely different. This is the Wizny Train. People who know my layout and follow the channel will know that I have created this very kind of implausible link between my secondary main line and an ex-Lancashire and Yorkshire branch line at Wizny. And for reasons known to very few people, there is a train that runs a couple of times a week up the Wizny branch and goes through the terminus and terminates eventually at Yarslow. And this is it. It comprises ex-LMS engine, so it's an excuse to run my LNER 242, in other words, but it pulls a couple of coaches, and these are Dapol coaches. They're actually the old Kitmaster coaches, are now sold by Dapol. And let's be honest, they're not going to win any modelling competitions, but they're all right. They're a good introduction to coach building. They give you an opportunity within the range, there's quite a few coaches in the range, to build things that aren't necessarily available ready to run. And simple though they are, they make up to be quite nice models, and you can make them up and flash them up as much as you like. And you can see on the interior of this one, I have painted the seats, LMS red, blue in first class of course. I have painted up 12 passengers for this train, 6 in each coach. There is a lavatory compartment, as you can see, and there are people dotted around the coach. Most of my passengers, as you may know from a past video, come from an enormous bag of various shaped humans and aliens from eBay, from China. I think I bought 500 people for a tenner. Some of them are HO scale, some are 00, some are some weird scale, and they stand about 7 foot tall. But if you start cutting their legs off and trimming them down and chopping off the tall hats that a lot of them seem to be wearing, it is quite possible to make some passengers out of them, and that's what I've done here. The coaches themselves, the glazing in these coaches is pretty basic. It's an insert, which means that from the outside it isn't that easy to look in, but you can detect passengers, and if you look very carefully you can detect the innards. I've painted the partitions brown and you can just about see that. So I have now painted the up platform in what I thought was going to be tarmac grey, and it's turned out to be very much the wrong colour. And there's the other problem I've got here, is it's the surface has gone all kind of bubbly, as you can see, and the shed hasn't been very warm. Hopefully as it warms up and this dries out it goes a bit flatter, but I'm not at all impressed with that. So not that I was impressed with the first coat of the dark grey anyway. So I've decided to go and get some different colours, and these are the two colours that I chose from the colour chart and I've had mixed up. The one on the left is more grey, the one on the right kind of bluey purple, and it's the grey one that I've gone for, and I've given it a test piece, and that is so much better. Once it's been weathered, the edges have been painted, that's going to make so much better. And this is what the finished article looks like once it's been painted. But just a word of warning, if you're going to paint sandpaper with a paintbrush, don't use your best paintbrush. It's basically eaten the end of the paintbrush away, because clearly sandpaper is abrasive. So for no other reason than I haven't waved the camera around the rest of the layout for a little while, and just to enlighten new viewers and remind older viewers that there is more to this layout than what's going on at Yarslow. Here's a view of Blowick Lane from the fiddle yard. Here's Blowick Lane platform, little halt, and this is Blowick Bridge. And then if you stand at Middle Junction and look back down the shed, this is the view, and this actually is taken from the same place that the very first picture that was taken in the shed, looking towards the door when the shed was completely empty. So it's interesting to see how quickly that's filled up. The branch of course on the left, storage sidings on the right. So after that interlude of a few trains, here's the next job tackled, and that was to fill in with the poly ripple text stuff all the bits that I hadn't done at Yarslow, really mainly behind the branch line and the engine shed area. And I've now come all the way down to the signal box and painted the same area chocolate brown once it was dry. I left it 24 hours to dry, and now I've painted it chocolate brown. and that's where we are as of this morning. So I'll leave the mineral train to rumble by, give you a tempter that next month is all about scenery at Yarslow. Stay safe, and I'll see you soon.